Gordana Siljanovska-Davkova.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for another session of our World Leaders Forum. We are just thrilled to host today Gordana Siljanovska-Davkova, the President of the Republic of North Macedonia. Thank you so much for being here with us, Madam President. I would also like to recognize the event's co-sponsors, the Harriman Institute and the East Central European Center here at Columbia. And I want to thank our moderator, Jack Lewis Snyder, the acting director of the Harriman Institute, the Robert and Renee Belfer Professor of International Relations here at Columbia, and one of my former professors too. So I'm thrilled to have him conducting this interview. In this president, we're welcoming an incredibly distinguished legal scholar who has risen to the very top of her country's government after taking office last year. She's an expert in constitutional law and one of the founders of political studies and political science in her nation. After completing her undergraduate and graduate studies, the president went on to become a professor of the Department of Constitutional Law and Political Systems in the Faculty of Law at the St. Cyril and Methodius University of Skopje. Alongside her academic work, the president has been a longtime public servant. She began her work as a member of the Constitutional Commission in the Assembly of the Republic of Macedonia and a minister without portfolio in the nation's government. For the UN, she's been an expert on gender issues and electoral issues. We were just having a really interesting discussion backstage about gender balance. Maybe that will come up today. In 1991, she was a member of the Geneva Conference on the former Yugoslavia, and she also represented her country in the Venice Commission. We are so honored to have somebody with her wealth of experience on the world stage with us to discuss the issues confronting her nation and the entire globe. Please join me in welcoming her now.
Hello to everybody. Sincerely, I feel like a student. But even as a professor, I'm very fond and I practice Socratic methods. It means that I teach the students, but I'm also ready to be taught by them. Or, like in peripatetical school, I am a dramatic person, I am walking and trying to provoke them, like once Plato or Socrates. And that is maybe my problem at the moment, but doesn't matter. I'm missing the students, really. There is no better profession than ours. You have a chance to be always young, because they are recalcitrant, they indeed very much like to arise strange questions, maybe strange for us, but not for them. And that's why sometimes I'm aware that politics maybe is not the right place, but I think that there is a chance to see the politics as the art of possible. But today, it is still who, when, and how wins. It's not my definition, it is Harold Glasfeld's definition. But I think that with more women in politics, there is a chance to act like the art of possible. So I very much want to use also literature when I teach. To speak about art, I am one of those who think that the cultural diplomacy would be very powerful, even more powerful than the traditional one. I am not fond of security and of protocols, let me tell you. That is something strange, but I have to be obedient. Today I wanted to arise something that maybe could be of your interest. Something about, so I used to say sometimes in a cynical way, our marathon towards Brussels, towards EU. Marathon, or maybe I can sometimes use the question, are we waiting for Mr. Godot? And when I mention politics, politics for me is always dialogue, debate. And I say that to my students that, do you know when the politics appeared in the book of uh, Robinson Crusoe? Indeed, you know when Friday appeared, and I used to say maybe Friday was a woman, but it is not in the book. So really, we started our marathon in 2005 officially, when we were given candidate status. But I forgot to introduce you something about so-called syntagma Western Balkans. I still don't know what it means, because there is no Eastern Balkans. It is a geopolitical syntagma that appeared at 2000s to explain what. Firstly, it covered the former Yugoslav states, but it was changing geography, something strange, because in 2004, Slovenia became a member of EU. So they said, former Yugoslav states without Slovenia plus Albania. When in 2013 Croatia became member of EU, then minus Croatia plus Kosovo. It is, in that time, probably a word, syntagma, that has to cover periphery, or meaning periphery of the European periphery. Or sometimes a highless hill. But today, they often use syntagma, EU is unfinished symphony without Western Balkans, and the interest for us in the Western Balkans arose not through a night, 3 years ago, when unfortunately the war in Ukraine started. Why? Because, sincerely, we Balkanians have also perceived ourselves as Europeans. Because, I don't know, we have always been geographically, historically, and culturally especially a part of Europe. So, there is a difference between EU. EU is political system sui generis. Somebody says unidentified body, unidentified, institution. And what is interesting is that at this moment, when enlargement process is also again on agenda, very, very interesting, because of Ukraine and Moldova, and because nevertheless they are a little bit far away from Western Balkans, and they are not fully in Europe, but then you students know that even in the 19th century, John Mackinder created so-called heartland theory, saying that who owns or who influences the so-called European East, possesses the world. And really, when we read the books, the papers written by Kissinger, by Brzezinski, they locate the American strategic basic interest there. And we are now aware what is happening there, but nevertheless, the path from Brussels toward Ukraine also goes through Western Balkans, so-called. So we are on agenda. That is the first. The second, what is very, very important, enlargement today and Western Balkans is not just a question of larger EU, but of stability, of security. Because every day we see what is happening. So maybe after the 203 so-called Thessaloniki summit, when really EU explained really strategy for enlargement and for Western Balkans, after that there was no strategy. There was no strategy. First, in my opinion, that is important. The second, also, if we are saying that it is so strange in 21st century to recall to Thucydides' world to the 5th century, the Peloponnesian Wars. I know that once I bought in the street here in New York the book Peloponnesian Wars, and imagine why, because probably you know he says that powerful do what they can and the weak what they have to. The result is now present, wars. So what we need, indeed, for a professor, law professor, it is so normal, logical, rational to say that what we need is a little bit more idealism, not utopia. Idealism for me means law, justice, ethics, morality. Or in the Greek language there is a nice word, timos, to be recognized. Why? Because if you are not recognized, then maybe the fruit of wrath could appear. So I think that this is a good chance for us, I don't know how many times, to be on agenda and to catch the momentum. Yes, because we have tried to catch the momentum many times. The result is 36 amendments for 30 years, and you with 27 amendments, and the Constitution with 7 articles. Our Constitution is very large, but you know how to cover with these 7 articles because of their essential power, because of the interpretation, and because of your great possibility through interpretation somehow to renovate the Constitution. So different problems. What I also want to stress is that I very much want sometimes to be like Scandinavians. Do you know why? Because Sweden, Norway, and Finland were the most supportive countries to Baltic countries, and Baltic countries became members of EU. On contrary, on Balkans, living still with remedies of patriarchic political culture, even of parochialism sometimes, veto is appearing. What it means? that a member of EU hasn't Europeanized itself being a member of EU, but uses the statutes being protected like a member of the family to prevent from advancement or walking towards Brussels, the neighbor. In my opinion, that is wrong. I have many times tried to convince colleagues of mine from the neighboring countries, both those members of EU like Slovenia and Croatia and the others, that we have to try to understand each other's, to support each other's. And that is the way we can prove that Homo Balkanicus is also Homo Politicus. Because I have already told you that for me there is a chance for the politics as the art of possible. There are some attempts in this direction. We are trying to do that, but it is not often case. I mentioned double standards. They are a catastrophe for the humankind, as you can see. Even the victims are not treated in the same way. Children are the same, children in Ukraine, children in Gaza, but some pictures are like a Guernica of Picasso. Shocking. So, really, we have to treat and to say, today I don't know where, I said that I'm very fond of Hemingway, but I often say farewell arms and the question for whom the bell tolls for all of us. Because nobody is innocent today. Somebody by doing, but also most of us by viewing and not acting. That's why I think that the first step in reforming the UN nations is to have for the first time, imagine after 80 years, a woman, a general secretary. Maybe this could be a change. This could be a change. And also, I think that there is a need for deep reforms within the United Nations. Indeed, you will say that I am selfish, I am egocentric, coming from a small state. But I know that they were excellent initiatives, mostly initiated by small states and middle states. Together, maybe they could even overvote the biggest. And also, I think that the decision-making process has to be located there through the procedure in the institutions. Because I'm afraid of fragile institutions, vulnerable institutions, and powerful individuals. I'm afraid of caudilism, of Caesarism, of Bonapartism, because it grows very, very slowly through the authoritarianism. Because we left one authoritarian system, Titoism, now we are facing Putinism. And somebody in the 21st century thinks that could act like Peter the Great. It's totally, totally wrong. That is what I want to say, that really, I think that EU has to rethink his position, because even EU is in a crisis today. Previously, it was personification, synonymous for democracy, for rule of law, for Rechtsstaat. Now it is not so. And we are facing such a crisis of leadership. Probably you know that better than me. I very much what an American professor, Joseph Weiler, excellent knower of Euro integration processes, in his book on European Constitution says that maybe the relation between the members of EU and the candidates, we like us, is wrong. Because in his opinion, it is simply listen and do. Because EU intend to join us, not we. The rules are clear, but the rules are excellent. They are known as Copenhagen criteria, but veto is not a part of Copenhagen criteria. I would tomorrow like to change our constitution, including the Copenhagen criteria, but it is not implemented. And maybe also we from the smaller countries and we out from EU have some ideas good. Maybe you from United States from a distance see the things better than we. So that's why I quoted Professor Joseph Weiler. And indeed I could continue with Richard Falk and the others with an excellent analysis of the new political, economic and geopolitical order, because really I think that each of us, especially we professors, have to do something to change the world. I still believe in United Nations. They still enjoy legitimacy. But sometimes they remind me to the League of Nations. They finished very in a bad way. We mustn't allow that. And tomorrow I will speak about this. Let's do something really to continue where the founding fathers started, with respect to the Charter, with respect of the international law, with respect to the verdicts by the courts. Otherwise, no, we are really, losing the time. We are losing the battle, because I believe still, that is my last sentence, I still believe in Kantian lasting peace. Kantian lasting peace. Not in Thucydides' world, not in Machiavelli's world, in Kantian lasting peace. Without peace, we could not reconstruct the United Nations. Yes, maybe missing students, I, as an epic person, started telling you the story. Thanks for listening me. I'm here to answer your questions. You made my day beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I know you were saying that you were missing the podium of the professor to lecture to the students, and so I hope we're going to give you a gratifying audience. So this is a fraught juncture in history, and it's gratifying to hear a European leader standing up firmly in favor of joining the key institutions of liberal democracy, which I know is, of course, mother's milk for you because you're a law professor. This is really like where you live, is the rule of law. Here at Columbia, political scientists are eager to have dialogue with European governments and scholars, since the US government is less and less interested in hearing what we have to say. So on the goals that you outline, totally full agreement. Back in 1990, I wrote an article saying that it was very important to have the new countries of the post-communist world join European Union institutions. But on the timing and the tactics, it's more complicated. As you said, the original plan was to have the transition into the European Union be sequenced, and for many of the states, gradual, prioritizing institution building, strengthening the democracy and rule of law, and establishing regional cooperation with East European neighbors, and settling issues of statehood. But in some places, like the Western Balkans, as you were saying, it's gone far too slowly. Some of this has to do with internal issues to the region, the historical development of what you were calling the periphery of the periphery, and also the nationalism, which typically happens in countries where the state is consolidated late and the people become aware of politics before they have a state that conforms to their self-determining nation. But a lot of the problems are also coming from outside, from the European Union itself. The economic crisis of the European Union around 2009 coincided with a slowing down of reforms in parts of Eastern Europe. 2014, which was a moment of great geopolitical turbulence, also coincided with a slowing down of reforms. Despite this slowdown, the president of the European Commission, van der Leyen, recently still says a larger union is a stronger union. So there's no debate about the goal. The question is the sequence and the timing. Should there be immediate membership in the European Union despite what, by the Copenhagen criteria, are shortcomings from full compliance from some of the candidate states? The states that were early joiners of the European Union, the East European states, started backsliding on democracy and rule of law as the EU lost leverage once they became full members, so Poland and Hungary. Some political scientists argue that because of that, it might be more efficacious to stick to the plan of incentivized milestones for, say, the Western Balkans countries, but to just do a better job at designing the milestones and creating incentives for keeping them. So the piece that I found convincing argued that the EU has actually kept the incentives large for joining. $6 billion for the Western Balkans Economic Development Fund recently. There's also a discussion about making the targets for reform more precise and tailoring them to the needs of specific countries. Now, I know in your abstract of your remarks, you used the word to bilateralize the relationship between the EU and the individual states. And you weren't sure that was working well. But some of the political scientists argue that is a way of tailoring the requirements to the political problems as well as the institutional needs, which are not all the same in the different Western Balkan states. The other point that I saw in this literature, and I don't know if I'm convinced about it, but since it's prominent in the discussion, I would be interested in your reaction. Some of these argue that there should be more focus on civil society support rather than what they call states start dragging their feet on reform. The recommendation is to shift the funding away from the states and to civil society. So that's my report from what political scientists are up to. I don't know whether anything that we're researching strikes you as helpful, but we have a couple of minutes if you want to respond to anything that I said, but I think we're also eager to hear from the students.
Yes.
So that's your pleasure. Whatever you want to do next.
Thanks for questions. Indeed, they are inspirational. And shortly, yes, there are internal obstacles. Shortly, lack of democratic tradition, lack of statehood, fragile civil society. It could not grow in communism. Also, spell system of recruitment of public and state administration instead meritocracy. Once I said, what do you want to face like Americans once when one President Garfield was assassinated by an unsatisfied person, and then we adopted Pendleton Act, and then indeed, from the best scholars, public servants are recruited. That's the right way. Then the problem with partitocracy, it is Italian phenomena. What means what? That there is no, unfortunately, difference between the state and the party. You could not see where the state party finishes and the state begins. And what it means that then the most powerful political hyenas are the presidents of the parties. Even now we are facing this problem. You're right. Then also problem with the objectivity of the media. Yes, I fully agree with you. But EU. What is the problem with EU? EU, I will indeed accept their explanation if they are related to implementation of Copenhagen criteria. But demands coming from our neighbors have nothing with Copenhagen criteria. Nothing. That we have had, I don't know, 5 centuries ago, joint history, something like that. I don't know. If we concentrate our power to historical issues, we could not solve the facing problems. History is for historians, and I do not want to think about that. But what is the most important? Recently, probably you know, Mr. Macron, before the students of Sorbonne, said that EU is not political machinery. It's not bureaucratic machinery. It is philosophy. And my comment is philosophy without principles and values is mission impossible. So, in the agreement on EU, in the Lisbon Agreement, in the Charter on Fundamental Rights, you will read that EU is proud of what? That is unity in diversity, and that will respect the cultural and the national identity of the nations and of the states. Veto is only in this area. I would understand veto if we are not pushing rule of law and instead that we are fond of rule of man. Indeed, indeed, but not in the matters that are ad acta in a democratic society. It is not good to ask me to explain that I am a woman. I do not want to do that. It is something mine, the same is with identity. Identity is something that is determined by self-determination, Wilsonian principle, that it is a part of, yes, you could determine yourself, the name, the coat of arms, the political system. It is up to you, because our legitimacy derives from the citizens and belongs to them. If we continue to change the constitution because of the will of some members of EU, then we have to put in our preamble that we, the people and the international community. It is not good. It is not good. And I also believe that EU has a constitution. It is not codified, but the documents I have mentioned have constitutional meaning and force. That's why, if EU is for democracy and for multilateralism, EU is also obligated to respect all constitutional documents. Otherwise, it is hypocrisy.
Well, thank you so much. It's certainly a problem in the democratic